although I'm very happy that he can be with his mother at this moment. But his voice will definitely be missed in this context. All right. All right, so we will get started here with this. We'll start with this particular article that about where are all of the transgender children? The answer being everywhere. So we will have we'll start with this one, and then we will proceed as appropriate to the other one. I think what Taylor was going to do was going to offer a very brief overview of some of the legislation that has been introduced in various state legislatures across the country, limiting access to health care for transgender children, and some of the hateful, just as hateful bills focusing on the fact that a small percentage of transgender youth are elite athletes, and that is a challenge that needs to be dealt with, of course, in the context of those sports governing bodies rather than in legislatures. We had the spectacle in Florida, right, where the transgender woman won the swimming races, and the governor came out and said, no, she didn't actually win. Or he probably even said he didn't win, knowing that particular governor, and proclaimed that the second place finisher was actually the winner. I don't know if the NCAA listened to him at all. I can't imagine they did. But just that kind of grandstanding and insensitivity and sort of focusing on imaginary problems in order to ignore real ones is something that seems to be increasingly common these days, and not just on this particular topic. But this is the topic that we're looking at today. So I think we'll start with this one. Before we get started, would anyone like to share anything that's on their mind in regards to this?
How many hours do you have?
Yeah, well, we have an hour, so we have an hour. Go ahead, Harriet.
I think they're in the high schools. Depends on if you get lucky. You can identify yourself and live a fairly normal life, as it were. Most public school systems and private school systems don't want this, and they don't want to handle it. So at the most sensitive time in these students' lives, they have to be kept quiet and to themselves. And it, I guess, just duplicates the aggravation and source they have, because they can't share who they are.
Right.
And I think that education has failed these kids.
Yes.
The one place where you look for new ideas and new things to happen and open your eyes to things that are new in the world is shut down.
Right.
So,
And also a place I just feel like every kid should be able to go to school and be who that kid is.
of course.
And to be in a situation. And of course, we live in human communities, and in human communities, it's not always just easy to be who you are, even in the most enlightened of them. So it's challenging enough under the best of circumstances. And so this sort of making it even worse. Go ahead, Arlene. Yeah.
I'm concerned about the criminalizing of parent behavior.
Yes. Yes.
If you're supportive and want to help your child grow and develop, however,
Right.
and Texas and possibly now in Florida and other states, you run the risk of having your child taken away.
Right.
from you.
Because you're trying to take care of your kid. I mean, it's perverse in just the most fundamental meaning of that. It's just insane that a loving and caring parent would be prosecuted or would be punished, and then someone who is indifferent to their kid's gender identity would somehow be applauded. It just doesn't make sense. Yeah, go ahead, Mimi.
I was for a long time very jealous of these kids because they had all of the vocabulary and all of the, support, but I changed my mind. Now I feel sorry for them because I could just slide by and there was no conversation about it. There were no laws made about me or anything. So I don't think it's good in any era, but.
Right. Well, right. And I think you're pointing to something that's very interesting in the context. And this is one of the reasons I was hoping that Taylor could be here today to talk about tomorrow is Trans Visibility Day. I think it was Jean's, it was your granddaughter, right? Yeah, who alerted Jean to the fact that tomorrow is Trans Visibility Day.
She's 10.
But I mean, and I think that's among the reasons why all of these laws are so perverse, because there's an element here of trying to close the barn door once the horses have all left. And if 10-year-olds are all familiar and completely comfortable, right, with the gender diversity of their peers, say for the sake of argument of their parents or of their siblings, right? That it's already too late for this sort of back. All of these laws will accomplish nothing except cruelty. And if the goal is to somehow I don't even know what the goal is besides cruelty, because you're going to pretend that transgender people don't exist. I mean, it's just it. But there is that sort of what I think Mimi is pointing to, right? This sort of damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of way that crossing strongly sanctioned societal boundaries it's going to be dangerous. It's going to be dangerous. Whether it's sort of undercover or if it's out and celebrated, there's going to be danger involved. And so, I mean, I just think of my son who is bringing home for Passover. He's bringing home his trans man roommate, and we're going to have Passover together. And I'm just thinking, I'm just so pleased that that's just not even a question, right? It's not, Dad, is it okay if I bring this person home, right? It's just that this is my friend, and that's just the way that's the way it should be for everybody. So
Why would anyone say no?
Ruth, it's a great question. Does anyone want to take a stab at why someone might be uncomfortable with a transgender person in their house?
I don't even think that's the issue.
They're threatened by what they don't know. Right? Yeah, go ahead, Harriet.
He or she may affect and get somebody in the family thinking that maybe they could be that way.
Right. Well, I mean, what if Levi, that's the kid's name, right? What if Levi, infects my kid? Oh, right. Yeah, go ahead, Arlene.
I think it's a manufactured political power ploy.
Right. Well, I think in the context of the legislature, it is. I think that's definitely true. I think in the realm of what Mimi and Harriet just said, right? That I think that is a not uncommon response to new ways of living, right? Things that you're not familiar with, right, can often feel very threatening, right? And the way, of course, to deal with that, right, is through education it's through focusing on human relationships, right? Focusing on the fact that, you know, these kids are just kids, right? Primarily, they're just kids. And once you get to know them as just another kid, right? Oh, they're just another kid, right? Yeah, go ahead, Jean.
Nora, our 10-year-old granddaughter, was in a production of Oklahoma, but a kids' production of Oklahoma, and kids 10 through 16. And the actor who played the character who sang "I'm Just a Girl Who Can't Say No," you all know that song, was binary, and that child's name is Soap. And in that community and among that school population, that is accepted, it's not unusual. Our other granddaughter has friends who are trans. I mean, it's really dependent on the community
Right.
climate.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I've been in these discussions hundreds of times. I've given my speech hundreds of times, and I used to think I could just do it off the top of my head. I can't. It has an effect. And now I kind of wish I had my butch bravado, but I've lost it. And when I try to wrap my mind around a 10-year-old having to be exposed to, I had all kinds of defenses. But,
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, right. And I think what you're pointing at, Minnie, right, is that a kid who's grown up in a family, right, that is completely accepting, right, of, and I remember this with, my kids when they were small, they were 5, I think, and 3. Is that right? 5 and 3, or maybe something like that. No, I think they were a little older than that. I think they were 6 and 4 or something like this. Anyway, they were really into nail polish at that point. And they loved nail polish because their mom wore this nail polish and it was, whatever.
Why did you leave it out?
I didn't leave it out. I don't wear nail polish. So,
It's normal.
It's just it's a normal thing for kids to do. So we were in Israel and the kids wanted to wear their nail polish to the summer camp where we were sending them. It was a bad decision. We shouldn't have let them do it because the kids there bullied them relentlessly, right? Because it was not that society at that time was not accepting
Yeah, but
of
why
that.
didn't the counselors give a little lecture about behavior?
It's a foreign country. It's a different culture. It's, I wish I could explain, Ruth, but I can't. Yeah, go ahead, Barbara.
What worries me about this kind of situation where there's this awful legislation is what I'm afraid of is that people are going to get hurt before this gets better.
Right.
These people they're cruel, they're vicious, I think. Don't care about people, don't care about how people feel. And it's a backlash right now. Eventually, we're going to get the backlash from our side of it, so to speak. But in the meantime, it's a
Right.
very scary
It
situation.
is. No, the number of these types of bills, whether you're talking about critical race theory, or you're talking about abortion, or you're talking about this transgender issue, it does feel as though the result will be that people will die,
Yeah.
and then
People are dying.
right. Yes, and then maybe, just maybe, right, enough people who are not cruel, who are not, fully on the side of hatred, will turn the tide. But this happened in Poland. It's not the backlash has not come fully there yet. But women are dying because they can't access abortion in Poland, and it's just I feel like it's just a matter of time. Right before Poles realize that these laws are not actually protecting people as much as they are putting people in danger. But anyway, so let's read this article, which I thought was a lovely thing. Where in the world are all the trans children? Everywhere. All right, so Marla Mack is a pseudonym. She is the parent of a transgender daughter, and she has a memoir and a podcast called How to Be a Girl. So I live in a Seattle, a large liberal city in a very blue state. Is that why my child is trans? According to supporters of the raft of proposed laws targeting trans youth in state legislatures around the country, the answer is emphatically yes. Transgender children are a liberal American fad, right? Our kids' identity is a fad, right? It's not real. Are they correct? Is the Family Research Council, a powerful right-wing organization that supports many of these bills, correct when it claims that children like mine are the result of a resurgence of postmodern thinking? Is it true, as a best-selling book has argued, that my daughter is part of a transgender craze sweeping America's youth? The evidence in my inbox suggests otherwise. I write a blog and host a podcast about parenting my trans daughter, and as a result, I receive emails from parents of transgender children every day. I can assure you they are not all writing to me from San Francisco, New York City, and Seattle. I can also assure you that my child is not channeling postmodern ideology, or was not doing that almost a decade ago when she told me at age 3 that she was not the boy we all believed her to be. My heart is a girl heart, she said. It's a beautiful, beautiful statement, right? My heart is a girl heart.
The child said.
The child said that, yes, the child said that. Soon after her announcement, I stumbled into the loving arms of a fledgling support group full of parents like mine, or like me, as we grappled with raising gender diverse children in a world that had yet to hear the name Laverne Cox. Does everyone know who? This might be a world that has not heard the name Laverne Cox either. Laverne Cox is a transgender actress who's famous in certain circles, but not in this circle.
Speak for yourself.
I mean, she's not famous in this circle because many people here have not heard of her. Not that she is unknown in this circle, just that she's not famous in this circle. But maybe, Jean, you could enlighten us. No?
That's a new black.
Is that what she was? Yeah, I mean, I'm. This is a real question because I know the name, and besides that, I don't know anything about who Laverne Cox is. So, but Orange is the New Black. Okay.
Among other things.
Among other things. So.
And she's a black woman who's been very outspoken, very attractive.
Right.
And has picked fights with a lot of people.
That's great. Yeah. No, and Laverne Cox is one of the things, right, is that in this sort of the notion of intersectionality, right, where certain you sort of are sometimes burdened, right, by multiple identities that might be difficult to manage in our society, right? So a transgender trans women who are Black, right, have particular challenges in our society. And so to have Laverne Cox, who is such a strong spokesperson for her identity, is very powerful. I don't know how I would have managed without them. And I wondered and worried about how parents like me were faring elsewhere, because everything I learned tells me that children like mine must exist everywhere, right? And probably, I think we can say with an equal amount of assurance, right, that they have always existed, right? It's just that the ways that people had to express those sort of heterodox gender identities, right, were different in different ages, right? But the prevalence of girl hearts in bodies that had been proclaimed male, I think were probably just as common in the old days as they are now. I learned that while many transgender people do not transition until adolescence or adulthood, significant numbers of young children are aware of their gender identity from a very young age. Dr. Christina Olson, a psychologist at Princeton, who studies gender development in children, says research shows that there are a set of trans people who first identify with their gender by the toddler or preschool years and continue to do so throughout their lives. I learned that children like this are not new. In her book, Histories of the Transgender Child, the historian Jules Gill Peterson documents the existence of transgender children in the United States dating back to the earliest 20th century. As far back as historians like me have found evidence of transgender people, she wrote recently in the Times, we have found transgender people. I read about the long history of people living outside the gender binary in cultures around the planet, including the Hijra of South Asia. I'm sorry, I'm going to pronounce this word wrong. Fa'afafin of Samoa and the Two-Spirit people in Native American cultures. And so different cultures have developed different ways of accommodating, or obviously in other cultures not accommodating people who are who would identify this way. After I started my blog, I began to receive emails from parents who said that they had children just like mine. At first, the messages came mostly from the US, including many from the Midwest and the South, right? But then I began to hear from parents farther afield. I'm the mom of a gender fluid kid who seems to be the only one in the whole country, wrote a woman in Italy. The father of a six-year-old in Argentina wrote to share research he'd found on transgender issues. Groups on Facebook connected me with more parents from around the globe. We shared stories in lengthy emails and in hours-long video chats, meeting each other's children and laughing and crying like old friends. Some of them let me interview them for a radio documentary produced for the BBC World Service. I was struck by how remarkably similar their stories were to the ones I had heard for years at my local support group in Seattle. In Johannesburg, South Africa, a 6-year-old wanted to know why God had forgotten to give him a penis. On the outskirts of Paris, a mother knew something was amiss when her 5-year-old grew distraught at the idea of one day having a beard like Papa. In Gurugram, India, a father was baffled by his child's deep depression and frightening incidents of self-harm. A mother from Kyushu, Japan, told me that she had never heard the word transgender when her child came out to her as non-binary. She described a Japanese legend about people who come down to Earth from the moon. And that's how I felt, she said. It was as if my child had said, I'm actually from the moon. And so that gets, again, Ruth, I think to your question before, right? Why would people have any problem, right, with their kid being transgender or say having transgender friends, right? It's because in many places, and probably also in many cultures, it feels like these people are coming from another planet, right? Like there's not anything that you've seen before. I remember when a transgender colleague of mine, this was now a couple of years ago, they came to give a presentation about transgender folks at Dinesh, and one of the residents there now, who's one of the late residents, couldn't stop staring at them. The woman was just like transfixed, and then finally Gray, that was their name, said, "Do you have a question for me?" And the woman said, "I've just never seen anything like you." And it was completely, and what I thought, could be sort of a very tense moment turned into a very sweet one, because Gray they were so masterful in their capacity to take questions and to be non-reactive in situations like this.
But it's literally true. I literally thought I came from another planet.
Right.
It's not an image.
It's not an image, right? Right. You come from some other place because you don't see anyone. If you don't see anyone else around you, then you must be an alien, right? Whatever. Yeah, go ahead, Mickey.
And I think from there, you then make it taboo, because a lot of cultures make things that they don't understand taboo, or even every day we do it with other things. So that wasn't comfortable, and there was a lot of negative stuff we have to come back from that.
Yeah.
It's a long journey back.
It's obviously never easy. I mean, And through this whole article, I've been thinking of the movie we watched last week in this space about Dnipropetrovsk, right now Dnipro, and the old Soviet, which is not just Soviet, right? But in many cultures in the world, any person with special needs, right, is not seen as a person, right? And they're literally not allowed to be part of the society, right? And that was a big fight in this country, and it'll continue to be a fight, right? These kids aren't, it's not worth educating them. It's not worth whatever, because they're not fully human somehow. Yeah, go ahead, Ariel.
On a very different note, when I went to school thousands of years ago, and if there were any left-handed children, the teacher would deliberately say, "You can't do that."
Right.
You would put your hand in your right hand, because I won't have you doing that.
Right. Well, it's worse. I mean, it's worse in other places. You were smacked for it. You were punished, right?
So anything that's different is going to be frowned upon. Look at what happened to Justice Jackson in the latest hearings.
Right.
When they said that she was on the Georgetown.
Right.
Georgetown Day Advisory Board, because her friend was the principal, something of the school. And they brought up a book, and they said, this Republican said, "Well, how could you allow this?" She says, "I have no idea what you're even talking about. I'm on the board. I don't look at this." Well, you should know what you're doing in an attempt to besmirch her reputation. You brought up something absolutely ludicrous and far away.
Go ahead, Jean.
Georgetown Day School was our daughter Shelley's school in Washington, D.C.
Wow.
And
Now you realize what a mistake you made by sending her there. I mean, my gosh.
And that clip of that exchange where she is explaining about the school and how when it was established in the District of Columbia, schools were segregated. And it was a school that was established by Jewish parents and white parents and African-American parents who wanted their kids to go to school together.
Right.
And Shelley said that clip of her is going to be the best recruiting.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
Because it was such a powerful statement of that school's ethos. And also Ted Cruz's children go to school at St. John's in Houston, which has in its library those exact same books.
Oh, cool.
Yes.
I'm because I know Taylor was concerned about it being.
You want to stop?
Yeah. So I just want to.
I'm glad that it's not a downer.
Right.
Well, no, and that's actually why I picked this article as opposed to some of the more alarmist articles, because this one is, I think, dealing with it straight, but it's also not just muckraking. All right, so we'll continue here. Like this mother and like me, nearly all of these parents were bewildered and terrified when they first learned their child was trans, but their children's suffering was too real to ignore. When the father in India finally discovered the source of his child's depression, she told him that she could no longer bear living as a boy. She asked her father if he was going to throw her out on the streets. Right? This is like, it's terrifying. He did not. Instead, he founded a group that supports transgender people in India. The mother in Japan did the same. A mother from Bogota, Colombia, joined a similar group after consulting 3 priests and informing them that if she had to choose between her religion and her transgender son, she would walk away from a lifetime in the Catholic Church. All 3 priests told her that humans may judge, but God loved her son, and she stayed. These children, their parents told me, are now thriving, living in the genders that match their hearts. In some cases, thanks to medical care that still remains inaccessible to many trans people around the world, right? And that's one of the things, right, that is that's one of the things that this legislation is trying to set, backwards, right, to move us backwards so that people will not be able to have access to that care, right? But if transgender people are a global phenomenon, so are their struggles. Just as in the United States, parents who have spoken publicly are often harassed or threatened for safety reasons, I'm not naming them. Nearly all saw relationships with friends and family members disintegrate when their children came out as trans. Several families immigrated to countries that felt safer for their children, right? Which I think we will see in this country, right? People who live in Idaho, right, and are threatened with jail time for taking care of their kids, right, are likely to move to another state, right? If they can afford to do so, because otherwise, what are you going to do? Yeah, go ahead, Jean.
One piece of legislation makes it a crime to take your child across.
Oh, yeah.
borders.
That's what I'm saying, right? I think that's the one in Idaho, right?
That's like the Van Act.
Right.
It was a federal offense to take somebody across the state line
Right,
for sexual trafficking.
right, right, exactly, and it's, yeah. Several families immigrated to countries that felt safer for their children. When my daughter is older, said one mother who left Mexico for the US, I'll tell her the real reason we left. These kinds of moves are likely to become more common as courts and legislatures around the US and other countries chip away at transgender rights, restricting access to gender affirming and life-saving medical care for children like mine. On my social media feed, parents around the world are asking one another, where can we go now? Where will my child be safe? It is not always so easy to stay hopeful while raising a transgender child in a world that so rarely chooses to welcome her. I wonder what I would do if my own state passed a law making her medical care illegal. I worry about where she will be able to live and travel safely when she is older. I worry about the children who live in places where being transgender remains a crime. Yet I'm hopeful because I have witnessed the ferocious protective love of parents from around the world. And that is not a liberal Western fad. So I think we can be hopeful, right? That, and I think one of the things that does seem different in a positive sense, right, is that more and more people are recognizing that they are not alone in this, and they are able to make chosen communities with folks who have other families that have transgender kids. The degree to which it's now for my kids just so common, and among my friends' kids, it's so common. You know, I have more friends than I can count on at least one hand. I don't know about two hands, but definitely on one hand, whose kids are transgender, and probably both hands. And I think even 10 years ago, that was not the case. Not that they didn't have transgender kids, just that I didn't know about it. Yeah.
College kids are used to accepting new ideas, so I can see where in college it would be more widely accepted. What about Jewish religion? I mean, how, is there a positive that comes from above? Because we don't have an above. We have lots of little.
We have no above, right? We have no above. Besides God, right? And I think, you know, and that's only for some Jews, of course, because lots of Jews are, don't have that above either. And so, I mean, I think that most rabbis that I would want to associate with would have the same opinion as the priests that were mentioned, right? That people will make whatever judgments they want because they're human, right? But God is not in the business of making judgments. God is in the business of loving all of God's creatures. So I think that's probably would be the answer. And I think that one of the things that's happening within Jewish communities today, for instance, is an effort in the Chevra Kadisha here, the liberal Chevra Kadisha here in Boston. There was a task force that came up with how to manage tahara for non-binary people, right? And so tahara is the ritual that Jews do when preparing a body for burial, and it's very, very gender segregated. If a woman dies, it's a team of women that go in to do the tahara, and if it's a man, then it's a team of men that go in. And so it's not, I don't know what this task force came up with in terms of the practical halakhic, sort of Jewish practical procedures. But just to know that this is a question that's being taken seriously by rabbis and other Jewish leaders, right? So this is something it's a real thing.
And what about the burial places? Are they classifying people? Are they accepting people as they are to be buried?
I mean, if you're Jewish, right? I mean, the people definitely, most Jewish cemeteries are not willing to accept non-Jews in there because it's sort of part of the way a Jewish cemetery works. But I think if a person is Jewish, a person is Jewish. It doesn't matter what gender they are. All right, so I wanted to show it. I wanted to bring this other article, which I thought was also sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Also kind of hopeful. And Taylor also was up for reading this one together. So I think we can read it and discuss because I think there's a tendency, and I don't think it's unwarranted, unfortunately, right, to sort of paint much of this hateful legislation, and to say this is all Republicans and whatever, so on and so forth. I do think that obviously the Republican Party is the source of much of this, unfortunately. To have one of the two major political parties in our country be so aligned with forces of hatred and intolerance, it just makes no sense to me. That's the way it is. But here's one Republican governor just shamed his whole party. And here he is, Spencer Cox, who is the governor in Utah.
Of all places.
Of all places, exactly. All right, so there's no question that the Republican Party sees benefit in stirring up fear about the existence of transgender Americans. Targeting transgender children and teenagers in particular with maximal hostility and cruelty has become a way for Republican politicians to signal that they are hardcore, that no one is going to get to their right? No one is going to go further to the right than me, because I am going to lock up the parents of those transgender kids, and I'm going to show those kids, what they actually are. Witness Texas targeting parents of trans kids for investigation as potential perpetrators of child abuse, or Senator Marsha Blackburn. If a person deserves the title less, I don't know. Demanding that the Supreme Court nominee, Judge Jackson, define the word woman, and segueing into a rant about a transgender swimmer. Which is why it was so extraordinary when Utah Governor Spencer Cox, a mainstream conservative Republican, on Tuesday vetoed a bill meant to stop transgender kids from participating in school sports. What truly distinguished Cox's action wasn't the veto itself, which came after the Republican governor of Indiana vetoed a similar bill. It was the letter Cox released explaining his veto, which did something I don't believe I've seen any other Republican do since the party launched its moral panic over transgenderism a few years ago. What did he do? He showed consideration for transgender kids themselves, right? Paying attention to the needs of those kids? No, we should only pay attention to the needs of the kids who are not transgender, right? That's the obvious, right? It's a simple thing, but it illuminates the void in all of the GOP scare rhetoric over this issue. Republicans constantly talk about parents' rights not to have their kids taught that transgender people exist, or the supposed threat to the sanctity of the school bathroom, or the idea that a battalion of biological males is about to rampage over girl sports at every level. I'm here to protect the girls. Just as their critical race theory panic is all about the supposedly fragile feelings of white kids who might become uncomfortable if they read about racism, their focus is anywhere but on trans kids themselves. Cox's letter goes into detail about the bill's legislative, legal, and financial implication, and mentions the case of Leah Thomas, the transgender UPenn swimmer who has become a kind of hate totem for the right. Thomas's success has been held up by Innumerable conservatives have evidence of the danger transgender women pose to other women athletes. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, always on the lookout for culture war venom to pour into the political debate, even made an official proclamation declaring the Florida resident who came in second to Thomas the rightful winner of the NCAA contest Thomas won. Blackbird asked Jackson to say what message Thomas's victory sends to girls who aspire to compete in sports. But Thomas is an extraordinary exception. A small portion of Americans are trans. A small portion of that small portion are interested in school sports when they're young, and a microscopic portion of that small portion will be good enough to compete at an elite level. It isn't hard to come up with rules to deal with that tiny number of elite trans athletes. The NCAA already has them, including a requirement that a trans woman must have completed 1 year of testosterone suppression treatment and show a testosterone level below a defined standard. If anyone thinks those are the wrong requirements, they can debate that and perhaps they'll be adjusted. As Cox points out, the state of Utah has similar rules for high school athletes. These rules already exist. They already exist. They don't, I mean, they may need to be changed, but it's not that this is not what's the word I'm looking for? It's not the Wild West. I guess even the Wild West wasn't really even the Wild West, but it's, but he also observes that there are just 4 trans kids playing school sports in the entire state of Utah, and only 1 is a trans girl. All right, so this whole huge piece of legislation with all kinds of financial implications, all kinds of enforcement implications, right? All because of 1 kid. It's just it's Meshuggah. It's exactly Meshuggah. Cox compares that to the 86% of trans youth reporting suicidality and the 56% who say they've attempted suicide, according to one study. Other studies show similar results, right? We have to protect all of those girls who might be competing against trans girls, right? But we don't need to worry about all these trans kids who are feeling suicidal and even attempt suicide. He writes, 4 kids and only 1 of them playing girl sports. That's what all of this is about. 4 kids who aren't dominating or winning trophies or taking scholarships. 4 kids who are just trying to find some friends and feel like they are a part of something. 4 kids trying to get through each day. Rarely has so much fear and anger been directed at so few. I don't understand what they are going through or why they feel the way they do, but I want them to live. How often have you heard a Republican say something like that? Heard them express understanding and sympathy for trans kids, some of the most vulnerable people in society. Heard them put those kids' struggle and pain and hope at the center of their thinking, not as an afterthought or something that must be ignored, but as a concern that should inform policy. Heard them treat trans people not with contempt and fear, but with decency and caring. The new visibility of trans people and their demand for equal treatment are disorienting for many traditionalists. They don't know how to integrate it into what they believe about the world. This is like the resident over at Dinesh. I've never seen anything like you, right? It's a struggle for a lot of people, right? And we should take that struggle seriously, right? But we shouldn't just pretend that the people who are raising that struggle don't exist, or that we should suppress them, or that we should just let them commit suicide because that would somehow be better. It boggles the mind. They worry that change is happening too fast. Trans people have always been with us, but many people were much more comfortable when they were silent. But we're never going back to that. We just aren't. Trans people are not going to disappear. Because of that, there will have to be some policy changes. There will be disagreement about exactly what those changes should look like, which is fine. That's democracy. But imagine if we all came to that debate with the same kind of humanity Spencer Cox just showed, not looking for an opportunity for demagoguery, but trying to treat people with understanding and care. We might be able to create a very different future and not tear ourselves apart along the way. All right, so I think we'll stop share there. And all right, so thoughts? Go ahead, Nikki.
And I think that under all of this, the people, I hate to say his name again, Hitler, and some of the horrific people who now exist, take the people who don't fit in, they use them as targets to explain everything else in the world that's not right, that they have nothing to do with.
Yeah.
And it's an easy mob response.
Yeah.
And I think that is what happened. Oh, we're talking about left hands. If Hitler could have thought of, you can't write with your left hand, he would have had all the left-handed kids cremated.
Yeah.
It's
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Please, Barbara.
Well, that was a comforting article.
Yes. Well, right.
I really admire him for doing that.
Right. And I think also what I really loved about the article was just that it puts these numbers into perspective,
Yeah.
right? That there will always be, right? You can always find the exceptional case. I don't remember his name, but there's a baseball player, I forget, maybe for the, if anyone's a baseball nut, they probably know this person's name, but I think he plays for the Angels in California. And he's like the only recent Babe Ruth kind of guy who pitches and slugs.
Ohtani.
Was it?
Shohei.
Yeah, Shohei,
Ohtani.
right, yeah, the Japanese guy. And, so you can always find, right, some exceptional person, right? But these people are so rare, right? So this Leah Thomas, okay, there's a trans woman who's an amazing swimmer, right? The vast majority of swimmers who are trans are not Leah Thomas, right? And sort of it's the fallacy of sort of taking an exceptional case and then saying everybody is like that, and then also, right, that it's 4 kids and 3 of them are trans boys. I mean, it's just amazing in all of Utah. Yeah, go ahead, Jean.
But there are plenty of other trans kids in Utah besides those 5.
100%.
And they're affected by the governors coming out and,
Right.
taking this position.
Exactly.
They would have been afraid to come out and.
I think that's exactly right, Jean, right? That the legislation, right, is targeting one kid, right? But it's not targeting one kid, it's the justification for the article is one kid, but it targets every trans kid in the state. And the governor is saying the trans kids are actually more important than that, right? They're more important than this crusade. Yeah, go ahead, Harry.
Trans kid in a 3rd grade classroom, unless the teacher makes special accommodations or at least not alerts, but educates the rest of the class if there are peculiarities, there's no chance that kid's going to feel comfortable. And as a teacher, I don't know of any thing going on in the teaching schools at Columbia or Harvard or whatever on this issue or been publicized.
Well,
If the teachers aren't prepared to deal with it in the classroom.
it's interesting. I'm not sure that that's actually the case. I don't have, someone sent me an article that was making the argument that it's important to include trans people among your teaching staff, right? And to support those people appropriately. But my sense also, my kids are now a little older, But my sense was that there were a fair number of trans kids in every class, and they just sort of integrated themselves. That it was sort of it's not remarkable in Brookline, at least, or Northampton, in the way that it might be in Utah. I don't know.
New York City schools have horrible times with the bathrooms.
Yes, the bathrooms are a challenge. Yeah,
Yeah,
bathrooms are a challenge.
but some new governor, some new mayor should be able to come down from the top with something. And I'm not aware of that happening.
Right. I mean, these are issues that are the practical. I mean, I do think that the practical issues of this this issue are real, and they need to be addressed, just as Paul Waldman says in this article. Right, transgender people are no longer hidden. Right, they are visible in a way that is different than they were before. So we now have questions we need to figure out. Right, we need to figure out how do we deal with bathrooms so that everyone feels comfortable. Right, and we're not going to do that by shaming trans people. Right, and we're not going to do that by shaming people who are not yet comfortable with that situation. We need to find a compassionate, solution to that. Go ahead, Barbara.
The trouble is, these people who are doing all this stuff apparently have no other way to deal with anything. They're not going to be thoughtful, and they're not going to be kind about all this and they're not even trying to be intelligent about it.
Right.
And that's the frustrating part. And there are so many of them, it seems, and they are so loud.
Right.
That, it's a terrible battle,
Yeah.
really.
It's exhausting.
It's exhausting. Yeah, it's exhausting. Yet it's also to hear stories, from some of the people here about their kids, about their grandkids, about about themselves, that I get to interact, because of Moses, with Moses's friends, right? These are joyful things. These are energizing. Stories, and so there's both. Right, the fight is exhausting, and it's the fight that gives us the energy to exhaust, so to speak. So, yeah, go ahead, Barbara.
The other thing that enrages me about these people is they have no imagination whatsoever.
They're grossly literal. Yes, yeah. Right. If you were a boy when you were born, then you're a boy. Boy, where do you start? Right, where do you start?
Even in your voice, because you were imitating.
Right.
It sounds like fear. If you were a boy when you were born, then you were.
Yeah.
Which is really.
Well, I do think it's fear. I do think that for many people, a sort of fundamental understanding of the world, right, is based on this particular binary.
Yeah.
Right? That there's a binary between there's women and there's men, right? And lived experience and science, right, has not demonstrated to them, right, that there are no totalities, right? There's no total woman, there's no total man, right? That we all have a mix, right, of various characteristics that some people might say, oh, she's rather masculine, right? Some people might say, oh, he's such a femme, right? And so that's just that's just part of being human, right? We're all fully human, right? Even if we do identify as a binary cis person, right? We're all fully human. So, but I do think that for a lot of people, it's very challenging to contemplate a world that is not so cut and dried. So I do think it's fear. Yeah, go ahead, Eric.
You have to have a little roughness for a parent whose child comes in and and has discussion saying, I'm going to be the opposite of what you thought I was going to be, because it's not just the mother and the father, it's the grandparents, it's a cousin. So that whole litany of people are presenting themselves. How can this be? I mean, how am I going to face it? How will I explain it?
Right.
So it's one-on-one, that's easy. The kid tells you, I wrecked the car. Okay, you'll pay for it. But the ramifications are so much bigger.
Right, and I have a friend whose child came out as trans, and this friend can't get over the fear that they have for their child, right? And that has so far completely overwhelmed their capacity to be supportive in this regard. I mean, I'm not here to judge that, right? I'm here to listen and to, whatever. I mean, it's I wish it could be otherwise, but I do think there's a lot of fear. And I do think also that one of the things that first article really got at, right, is how terrifying it is when this happens, right? And why it's so important to find other people who've gone through the similar process, who can offer insight, can offer perspective, can offer comfort, right? Anytime there's a major change in the way that your family orients itself, there's going to be upheaval, and there's the change and the, whether it's death or divorce or some sort of major accident or the loss of a job or whatever it is, right? These changes come with all kinds of fear, as well as opportunity. So yeah, I just think it's. I think what you say is very true, Harry, right? Let's start with Rahmanis, right? Start with compassion, and then let's move to the practical aspects.
Yeah, but that's subtle, and not everybody is subtle.
You're right, Ruth. Ted Cruz is not subtle.
That's why he's so successful.
It's one of the reasons, right? There's a reason why smart people are very often not subtle, because they're smart enough to realize that subtlety doesn't necessarily serve their cause.
And so,
Right? This Spencer Cox is probably going to get a lot of backlash, right, in Utah from people who want to be to the right of him on this. That what we have to smush that one trans kid, right? So let's smush every single other trans kid while we're at it, right? Yeah. So
Just wait till it's his kids.
right. I mean, and who knows? Maybe Spencer Cox does know more about what these kids are feeling. Maybe he has, someone in his life, someone who's close to him who's trans, and so he actually does come by that compassion through relationship with someone rather than through a moral imagination.
I was thinking of Ted Cruz's kids.
Oh, you're thinking Ted. Oh, poor Ted. Oh, my gosh, it would be so awful to be. Can you imagine having Ted Cruz as your dad? Oy.
Just that famous picture of her turning her head when he's trying.
Right. Oy. This would. Anyway, we don't choose our parents. Let's choose them.
I'm happy I have mine though.
Yes, me too. I got very lucky myself, so I'm very. All right. So Isaac, want to add anything?
On that or on other things?
You can add the other thing.
The other thing. Excellent.
I mean, you're welcome to add on this
Happy to
topic
talk
too,
about that
but
topic.
Isaac has a different topic.
I'll give you one take on that topic, and then I'll pivot.
Great.
And my one take on that topic, which I think was like sort of the first line we read together, was the sort of the joke about whether it's because she's from a blue state.
Oh, right.
And I think if you do the sort of the political analysis, I think that link between transgender kids and the left is important, because I think it's connected to a culture war that's really wrapped in an economic war, and that this issue is being used as a wedge issue within a larger discourse about sort of the direction of the country and its socioeconomics. And I think actually Ted Cruz doesn't really care. I don't think any of the Republicans who are making an issue of transgender children actually really care all that much for or against transgender children. They're just using them as a symbol, which is almost uglier in a lot of ways.
In some ways, it's worse. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not outright hatred of them. It's callous disregard and use of them,
for their humanity.
right? Or complete denial of their humanity in order to serve a larger political.
In sort of the Kantian framework, right? It turns people into a means, right? Instead of their own.
Well, that happens all the time, unfortunately. Yeah. But that's one of the great things about this Spencer Cox letter, right, is that he pulls the veil back on that, and he treats, at least in that letter, I don't know about anything, I know nothing else about this man, but in that letter, right, he clearly treats transgender kids as kids.
Yep.
All right, so
The other-
switching topics.
Switching topics completely, I wanted to invite folks, we're having Harvard Hillel students are coming on this Sunday at 1 p.m. to talk about something completely different, although, you know, I'm sure they'd have their own perspectives on what these issues are like in college if you wanted to raise it with them, but they wanted to come and talk about folks' Passover experiences and to do some one-on-one, two-on-one interviews and to ultimately compile a little book for the building of Passover experiences that folks had, meaningful traditions, stories, and to share those booklets at some of our Passover events later in April.
Could, after you finish, Rabbi, repeat it because I can't hear you.
Yeah,
You have the louder voice. So, but just to finish up, I would love, I'm going to take out a pen and pencil. If you're interested in coming, I'd love just to take down your name quickly so that I can follow up with you.
And I'll, you know, if you send me a blurb, I'll put it on in the weekly bulletin.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I will do that.
So
So
if
do
you
you want to
send it to me today. But yeah, so what Isaac is saying is that on Sunday, there is going to be a group of students from Harvard Hillel coming, and they want to talk with a group of people here, and they also about Passover experiences, memories of Passover, and Passover customs, and so on and so forth. And they want to do this. I don't know if do they want to do it at all in a group setting or just in one-on-ones?
We'll kind of pair. We'll do some pairings.
Okay.
So you'll be having sort of one-on-one. You'll all be everybody will be
And so
together.
we'll gather together, and then people will be paired up, and they'll do some like oral history type of interviewing, and then some of the things that then they'll compile some of what the material they gather and into a booklet that we'll be able to use for Passover.
Here, in this room.
In this room.
In this room at
This
1
room.
1 p.m. on Sunday. 1 p.m. on Sunday. So
1 o'clock Sunday, this Sunday, April 3rd.
April 3rd. You'll do it. So it just, if you're interested, I'll just Mickey, Arnie, and Aileen. I just remember that.
I think Ruth would like to come.
Aileen will do it.
Ruth, would you?
I don't know whether I want to relive all this work.
That's, you can convention.
All I did was they made me make the matzah. Oh, right, turning the kitchen upside down, putting foil everywhere, right on. Yeah.
That's relive it, Ruth.
Sehr schwer.
Am I signing you up?
No, don't sign me up. I'm gonna try to come.
Okay.
But if you sign her up, you could call her and
Yes,
remind her.
I'm gonna. Who else is interested in joining?
Harriet, yeah.
Harriet.
No, maybe
No,
I may come.
Please, please sign
And
up
this
and
is
I'll
a-
do it.
this is
I'll
just
do
a
it.
note to-
I don't know. I'm going to do something.
Zava.
Zava. You are now.
If you come outside,
Come out with me and play.
Anybody else interested?
And I learned from you.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
All right,
That's
well,
all I have.
Great,
And
thank
I will
you.
send you a blurb.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for staying so late. I'm sorry I kept you past time by 15 minutes. But I really appreciate this conversation. So glad.
You were gonna serve tea and cookies.
Next time. Actually, for so long we were, because of COVID, we were not having refreshments.
Right.
But there's actually no reason not to have refreshments now. So I think tea and cookies is a great idea. Jacob, let's put that on our list of things to figure out, how to have tea and cookies. It means, of course, buying the cookies, but the tea, we would have to figure out if we have a teapot.
We need to figure that out. I think there is a kettle, but the stove seems to be turned off.
Right, so we need to, we have to get an electric kettle.
Yeah, I would like to use that.
That'd be great. All right, thanks, everybody.